So, welcome to the Behind the Bar podcast. Today we're joined by Phil. Phil, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Phil, and I'm the landlord and owner of the Gardener's Arms, also known as the Murderers in Norwich.
Why does it have two names?
So, the pub dates back to at least 1841 as the Gardener's Arms. We still trade as the Gardener's Arms. All our HMRC is all set up as the Gardener's Arms. But in 1895, the landlady's daughter was murdered by her estranged husband. He was charged, convicted, and sentenced to death. But 8 years after the Jack the Ripper murders, every husband who murdered his wife would fundamentally say that his wife was a lady of loose morals.
Oh.
So there was a petition drawn up, and there was a massive public outcry. 10,000 people signed this petition, which was about 10% of the entire population of Norwich. And his death sentence was eventually commuted to life in prison. And the pub acquired this nickname of the Murderers, which over the 125 years since has actually overtaken the real trader name of it.
Obviously, that's quite a big part of the pub's charm.
Yeah.
How much did you acquire just by being in there, and how much did you end up just researching yourself?
So when I've been there 39 years, and when I first started at the pub, there was this apocryphal story about how a prostitute had murdered a client, and I'd always been really interested in history. So just looked up some records and went through the census records, and really couldn't find anything until an old landlord from the 1930s died, and her son brought in a pile of newspaper clippings, which included this gentleman's name called Frank Miles, who did the murder. And then it just sort of snowballed from there. Went through the police records. We got the trial notes. I got the parole notes as well.
Wow.
And there's just so much fascinating history behind the murder, but there's also lots of interesting stories about other landlords who have been at the pub as well.
Yeah. And because there's so much, are you quite, in a way, forthcoming in the pub with all this information for visitors and things? Or
No, absolutely. Well, the BBC made a film about us about 10 years ago, so that's on YouTube. We've got transcripts of the newspaper articles dotted around the pub. We've got the death certificates of the two people involved. We've got the marriage certificates. So it's a story that people always come in and want to know about. And there's a lot of people out there who have lived in Norwich all their life, and they don't actually know the pub as the Gardener's Arms.
yeah.
But outside the pub, our swing sign has got the Murderers on one side and the Gardeners on the other. So, people are very much creatures of habit who realise that, there is lots of stories and lots of history in our pub, but obviously pubs across the UK.
You mentioned that you've been in the pub for some years. Have you always been in this pub?
Yes. So I started as a 15-year-old glass collector, massively into my sport when I was at school, and my PE teacher said, "Would you like to earn a few quid collecting glass on a Saturday?" So quite happy to be 15 years old and wandering around a pub on a Saturday night, and then work my way up through the system. So when I turned 18, I started serving behind the bar. 21 became general manager, then bought into the business when I was about 30, and then 3 years ago my wife Cherie and I bought the whole business. So
wow.
We've now got the freehold. Well, we haven't got the freehold, we own the lease, but we've got a 30-year lease, and we're hopefully going to see our dotage out at the pub.
Because you started so young, was it already something that the previous landlords embraced with all the murder and the history behind it, or is that something you've sort of gone into?
Yeah, I think I've gone into it a lot more than what I mean. I think historically people just thought that was a story that someone had made up.
Yeah.
But then nobody really knew where the story had come from. So it was always something that we'd talk about. But having done the research, I think that actually gives it a bit more meat on the bones. But certainly, when I first started, everyone knew it was as the Murderers, but wasn't necessarily sure why. But yeah, it's a massive talking point in the pub.
Yeah. And you run this with your wife, did you say?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. How has it been, I'm guessing because you started there so early, in a way, bringing family into the.
Well, it's sort of a rite of passage in some respects. I think over the years, I mean, I didn't know my wife when I was 15, so she always knew that I worked at the pub.
Mm,
My daughter was actually born in the flat upstairs. My wife had a 45-minute labour.
wow.
My son at the moment, he's my assistant manager. So it's something that isn't necessarily expected of my kids,
Mm,
but it's a really good life lesson to learn, communication and interacting with older people and just being in and around people in sort of situations where they're relaxed and they're social. I think
mm,
the problem that you have with younger people these days is that they have mobile phones and they've lost the art of conversation. Whereas if you force, maybe not the right expression, but if you get your younger people to try and interact and socialise and communicate, it's those life lessons that
yeah.
really are important. And certainly, I think the family aspect of the pub is really key to our success as well. There's so few family-run businesses in
Yeah.
city centres these days that um, it's a USP in some ways, but I think certainly our staff see that when they come into work, they see me every day. My wife does the cleaning, a lot of the admin. She's turned the business around in the last few years as well with the finances and stuff like that. But they see us wandering around the pub, so they're not working for a faceless corporation or a person who's been there for 6 months and then going on to
Yeah.
another pub somewhere else. And that's the same with the customers as well. I often get comments saying, "Oh, I can't believe you're still here," and it's just lovely to see that sort of local, atmosphere that you'd get in a country pub
Mm.
in the city centre. So it's nice to sort of pass on the baton, certainly with the kids, and certainly seeing them growing up around the pub and taking on the mantle of where hopefully we'll leave it with them.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Because running a pub with your family, or with it being very intertwined, would you say that that's sometimes difficult? Or do you
Um,
think it's a blessing in disguise?
I think it can be difficult. I think there's any relationship is always going to have its highs and lows. I
Mm.
think the fact that we are so closely entwined, working with each other all the time. When we had the pandemic, we had quite specific issues
Yeah.
as well, and that was a very distressing time because when we lived above the pub, and you're going down and you're cleaning and painting and doing, you're in a quite tight confined area, and there's no get out. And I think that's the same with the pub as well. With when we're open, is that me and my wife see more of each other than most other couples. And like most other couples, we'll argue.
Mm.
But not only are we arguing about personal stuff, we're also arguing about stuff for the business as well.
Yeah.
Um, but again, the relationship seems quite strong, and we do all right.
How does it affect like a work-life balance?
It's very difficult. I think in the last few years we found it a little bit more difficult to get away from the pub. I think um, you know the pub isn't necessarily all consuming, but we don't get away as much as we should.
Mm.
Certainly, our kids are now grown up. And they live away. We like to probably spend a little bit more time with them, come to see them. But again, the business is really important, so we've got to get that right before
Yeah.
we can actually say, right, we're going on holiday for 6 weeks, or we're going away for a weekend, and that's getting those ducks in a row to make sure that everything's okay. But we are very lucky still. The pub is quite successful. We're taking good money. The profits aren't quite as high as they used to be,
Mm.
but it's you know the balance is nearly there. I turned 50. I know it's very difficult to believe. I turned 55 in June, and I know that there's a period where we need to get the things in place so that the pub is running by itself and operating by itself without us needing to be there.
Hmm.
And that's up to us to make sure that that happens. But we've got a little bit of time left.
With the years that you've been at the Murderers slash the
Yeah,
Gardeners, I remember reading that you've served your like 1 millionth pint there.
yeah, that's right.
When you put it into numbers, how does that make you feel?
It's that was really weird. That I worked out that. over a month period how many pints I sold in a day, and then multiplied that by 5 because generally I do 5 days a week. When you say that in numbers, it's a lot. When you say next year I've been there 40 years, that's a long time.
Yeah.
But it's not any different to other people who've worked in industry, or But I think people now don't have jobs for life, and that's quite sad. I know that when my dad was at the post office, he was there for 37 years before he retired. Doctors and nurses, they're in it for the long haul as well. But yeah, them numbers are crazy. 1 million pints over the course of, well, which was about 25, 26 years, is a lot of beer.
And a lot of people.
A lot of people, yeah, and again, we aren't a huge pub. We've done really well. It's built up over lots of years, but it's just really weird. I think someone said it was like 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools full of beer,
Oh, wow.
and that's just beer. That doesn't include spirits and
Yeah.
alcohol pops and soft drinks and stuff like that. So it is amazing, and I'm sure if people took the time to work out exactly how many pints they'd sold as well, I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to stuff like that. So it's interesting to put them figures together.
With that many customers coming in, has there ever been like some memorable people that you just remember clicking with, or just...
Yeah, I think so. I think that you can't go through the industry without remembering some of the characters that you've seen. I mean, obviously, most of the time they're regulars who come in on a very sort of frequent basis. But yeah, we had a guy called Pete who used to come in every day, drink his 5 pints of Boddingtons, and that was his social life. He didn't have any family. We used to have a guy called Bob who used to come in and just drink rum and coke, and he used to be in the Navy. And some of the stories he'd tell. Lady called Margaret, who used to live in Bermondsey, moved up to Norwich. She would come in the pub because she felt comfortable, and because we made her feel at home.
Yeah.
And that's quite gratifying. I think unfortunately in the industry you tend to sometimes remember the bad experience rather than the good experiences. But as I say to my staff, when we do have rare instances of disorder or problems, take that out of context and you worry about that all the time. Just remember the hundreds of thousands of people who walk through our doors on a monthly, yearly basis. And, you realise that there's more good people out there than bad. And certainly, I think over the years, I think in like I say, 39 years, I've only ever been hit twice, and they were both by regulars. And again, it's all about communication. If you can talk to people, and everyone has the potential of being, aggressive when they've had a few pints. You give them a smile and a joke and a little bit of time, the chances are that they're going to probably be all right, and you can reason with them. If you go over as soon as things start kicking off, then it's going to be slightly more difficult.
Yeah, you might just add fuel to the fire.
Absolutely. But yeah, I think there's hundreds of people who I've met over the years. A few celebrities have come in over the years as well. But yeah, generally just everyone just comes into the pub for a chat, for a beer, to get away from it all. So yeah, I think everyone who's I've interacted with, hopefully over the years, has generally had a good experience.
With its history, it must be some sort of, well, it is a destination for people. It's a tourist attraction at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think there's only a few pubs in Norwich that have got the history and heritage that we have, and I think we have embraced that over the years as well. Norwich is a fantastic city for beer and pubs, and the pub scene is absolutely fantastic. But there's not enough made of the history and the heritage of certain pubs in the city, and I think that becoming a tourist attraction has become really important to us, and making it so that people have a really good experience and they can find out more about the pub and the landlords is absolutely essential, because I think we are only a part of this story. Pubs are about people, and I think that I've been there 40 years, but I take a step back. The next person is the most important person in that pub, but they're only as important as the customers who come in to see them. So it's really important that when we do things and we look at the history of the pub, we pass them stories on, because there's the murder. We've got links to Buffalo Bill. We've got a guy who's part of the Royal Veterinary Corps that was formed in the First World War. So there's lots of little stories about different people who've been at the pub over the years as well. So it's passing on their stories as well, which is really important.
How do you balance between keeping it lively for for a tourist coming to Norwich, and also keeping the regulars coming in, like the Margarets, and how do you balance that?
It's again, we're really lucky that having a destination in the city centre. We have a lot of footfall, but it's just keeping the standards up. I think we've spent a lot of money over the last few years making sure that the pub is clean, presentable. Put a new roof on a couple of years back, changed the electrics. So it's all those little things, and as soon as you start letting the upholstery run away with you, the paint starts flaking off the walls, the tellies don't work, the light bulbs aren't bright. All these little things are things that people come to expect, and certainly having the option between having people who are from away who've heard about the pub and want to come in to see us, and having the locals who want to come in, and we do a lot of live sport, good local food, great real ales. So it's about those people who you want to try and entice, but if you open your door to everybody, then chances are that they will hopefully come. If you aim for a specific demographic, you're going to start struggling at some stage.
You're not like as open as you could be.
No, yeah, we've in the early days we were a young trendy bar, and then all of a sudden the next trendy bar opens and we were quiet. So it's about just little and often. We know what we do it very well. And as long as we keep our standards right, our clientele base right, our prices keen, the environment clean and tidy, people will come back. And certainly wet-led pubs are really essential at the moment. People aren't going out casually dining anymore. So, we have to make our price point really keen to make sure that people do want to come in.
Yeah.
And certainly, if word of mouth is the best form of advertising, you that's what you have to do.
I know that you mentioned earlier your daughter Molly, and that potentially we've heard that she's an actress.
She is, yes.
How have you managed to integrate that, I guess, with the murderers?
Again, I think a lot of it is down to communication. I think that the fact that she's been really confident, she's worked at the pub from the age of 12. So it's that theatrical bent that I think I may have as well. But I think that having that confidence to go out, because the bar is a stage. People don't want to come into pubs and see people who are miserable and upset. And if you can make someone laugh, make somebody smile, you have that interaction with people. That's something I think she's learned from her time at the pub. I mean, she's very talented anyway, but she gets that from me. But I think that she has. I think all my children have benefited, and my nieces and nephews have as well. But yeah, I think that when you're younger, having that confidence to go out and be on a stage and sing or dance or do proper theatre can be sort of supplemented by there's a lot of actors who work in bars in London and across the country, because that gives them a platform to be able to hone their skills. I think there's a lot of, like I said earlier on, there's a lot of youngsters now who are so sat on their phones that they don't actually talk to people, and I think that's a real shame. And I think certainly Molly's benefited over the years from certainly being able to talk to people of any platform that comes into the pub.
I've heard some little things about a short film or something with the pub?
That's right. So a couple of years ago, we thought that would be funny to make like a Christmas advert, but it was more like a Christmas card to our customers.
Mm.
So we did a bit of a spoof of Love Actually,
Hmm.
the scene where Keira Knightley is at the door, but the guy who comes to the door with the signs actually is in love with the pub. So Molly comes to the door as the cleaner, and she thinks the signs are for her, and unfortunately she's a little bit disappointed when the guy says he's in love with the pub and wants to come in.
What do you think sparked that? Like the not the energy behind it, but
The
the thought.
concept,
Yeah, the
yeah, yeah.
concept.
So I just think that I mean, Molly's from a very young age has been really keen on making short videos, and when they used to do history projects at school, she'd drag me out and make me do, she'd film it rather than write it down, and the teachers loved it, and they'd show it in
Yeah.
class. And I just think that she's been to drama school, she's got a lot of contacts, and she was not short on work, but I suggested that I thought this would be a good idea, and she just ran with it. So I think that it's nice to do things that work well, and I think certainly when we did that, it was just really clever, and I think that she wrote it really well, and it just made a real sort of
Mm.
bright spark to the build up to Christmas. And it's a little bit of fun. We've talked about doing another one, but she's been quite busy with work and bits and pieces, so it's been a little bit more difficult. But the next one we've got in line is quite a big budget one, but whether we'll get around to doing it is another matter.
Ooh, well, I'd be interested in hearing what that
Yeah.
is. Other than, I guess it would be the customers possibly, but what makes you stay in the trade?
That's really a good question. I think that I love it.
Hmm.
There's also days where I absolutely hate it, but I think that there's just a lovely buzz about working in a pub. I think I would struggle if I ran a pub where the staff weren't good
Yeah.
and the customers weren't good, and we were always looking at trouble with the police. But it's about building those relationships, and I think I try and challenge myself every year. We do a thing, or I instigated a thing a few years back called City of Ale, which is a big citywide celebration of Norfolk beer,
Mm.
brewing, and pubs. First of its type in the UK. Basically, it's a beer festival inside pubs, and I co-chair that and organise that, and
Mm.
I have a great team of people behind me doing that, and it just drives people back into pubs. It gives people a reason to go back to their locals and go into pubs that they haven't necessarily been into.
Yeah.
I like to think that I try and put back into the industry as well. We're only as good as the beer and the other pubs around us. That would be a very sad state of affairs if there was fewer and fewer pubs in Norwich to be able to do this with. This year we're hopefully going to have 51 pubs, which is great, taking part.
Is it quite daunting to do something
It
that
was
scale?
it was to start off with, but I think now people will understand what we're trying to do, and,
Mm.
and that it works really well. It isn't as much about me being behind the bar at the pub, it's about me doing other things
Yeah.
as well. Certainly, it isn't about trying to reinvent the wheel, it's about trying to do what we do really
Mm.
well. Certainly, probably about 15 years ago, we tried live music. So we built a stage, put a lighting rig in, put some sound, and we ran it for about 5 years, but it didn't really make us any money.
Mm.
But the events that we put on were brilliant because we invested that money back into it.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do anything, you've got to do it to the very best of your abilities. And that's something that I've taught my children. That's something that I've tried to instigate in the staff as well. Because if you want to do something, you have to do it to the very best of your ability. Otherwise, you're not going to achieve what you're setting out to do. So I think that I still love it. I still enjoy the industry. I still love the buzz of a Saturday afternoon working in the bar. I love the interaction with customers. But what I've tried to do is step myself up. So I'm not just running a pub. I'm trying to put other events on. I'm trying to make Norwich a destination
Yeah.
for other people to come to. And certainly, like I say, City of Ale has brought people from across the country to Norwich. which isn't the number one destination on people's lists of places where they want to go. But we have regular people who come up every year to take part, which is fantastic.
How do you organise such things with that many pubs?
Well, we have regular meetings at the pub. We have an email sort of group, and people get it. People understand what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
We have a subscription, so pubs sign up to paying for it. We have little lapel pin badges. We have 8 trails, and people complete the trails, but they have to go into each pub to get a stamp. This year we've had an app made, so they can scan a QR code and get the badges that way as well. But yeah, like I say, pubs get it, but they understand that to try and get new people into their
Yeah.
pubs is the real holy grail of what you're trying to achieve with a pub. It's a way to try and bring together a community of publicans as well.
So a lot more collaborative, because I know a lot more. A lot of people might see like that they're in competition with the one opposite them or something like that. But that seems more.
Well, I think there's an element of that anyway. I mean, I want to be the busiest pub in the city, but the Munich Beer Festival started with 4 beers, and that's grown and grown and grown to the stage. Well, I think the first year we did City of Ale, we had 5,000 programmes printed. Now, if 5,000 people come into Norwich, we're all going to benefit from that. People generally don't go to a pub, stay there all night, and then go home. If you go to a city, you will wander around the pubs. But if you have a trail where people have designated pubs where you're making that the reason why they want to go to that pub.
Yeah.
And I think the pubs that take part see more of a return than the pubs that don't take part.
Because they're pinpointed.
Absolutely, and it's a benefit to our city, it's a benefit to our industry. And like I say, it's a reason to get people out, walking the streets, drinking good beer. Because, the beer in Norwich is probably some of the best in the country.
I have heard of a potential, or you had a special beer or ale made a couple of years ago.
Was that the one for my millionth pint?
The 25 years?
Yes,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, same thing.
Yeah, basically the same thing. Yeah, so the Woodfords have worked really closely with me over the last 20 years or so, really. But yeah, they brewed a special beer for my 25th anniversary, and then they did another one called One in a Fillion for the millionth pint.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, but again, it's working with next year. I'm working with a brewery to hopefully do a monthly special for my 40th anniversary. So it's going to be a nice ruby beer, but just infused with different hops and malts and bits and pieces. So.
And you'll be, in a way, the only one serving it, sir.
Absolutely, and again, it's about creating those stories for yourself. And I know that some people don't like me because I'm always in the press and always talking to the media, but there's a lot of publicans who won't speak to them. And I like to think that I speak on behalf of the industry rather than just on behalf of myself.
Yeah.
Does it make me a maverick? Not really. I think that as I've got older, I've got more of an opinion, and if I see stuff that's unjust, I will probably say stuff. But it's about having an opinion sometimes.
With saying that, how do you feel about the current?
I just think it's really sad. I think it will take a brave government to swap round where we are at the moment. I think that the hospitality industry is really on its knees at the moment, and from a selfish point of view, we do all right. We're not making as much money as we used to, but we have got a lot less to lose because we're one small pub. If the pub isn't taking any money, I don't take a wage. Whereas when you're a big corporation, you've got you've got lots of sites. But certainly, you look at Ireland. Their VAT for hospitality is due to drop down to 9%. I think in July. Most of Europe. I went to Lisbon last October, and every lunchtime, the little restaurants and cafes were all full. And you go to the supermarkets, you can't buy a sandwich, you can't buy sushi, you can buy some cold drinks, but there's no takeaway food. So the incentive is for people to go to bars and restaurants to eat.
Yeah.
And that supports their hospitality industry. But over the years, we shouldn't be in a position where, as a operator of a big city centre venue, it's cheaper for me to go and buy supermarket vodka than it is to get it from my wholesaler.
Yeah.
It's a ludicrous position to be in, and it shouldn't be allowed. But that's the position we're in. And like I say, you know, the hospitality industry has become an easy cash cow for lots of different governments over the years. Are we going to change it? Hopefully. Will we bend some ears? Definitely. Do you ruffle feathers when you ban all MPs from your pub? Definitely. But then I've spoken to my MP, and he gets it, and he understands that this is a call for help rather than a blanket ban on
Yeah.
MPs coming into your pub. You know, MPs aren't listening to us at the highest level, and I think that, you know, we do struggle. Pubs are closing, jobs are being lost, and that needs to be addressed. But how are we going to do it in the short term? You know, we can't go on strike like train drivers or doctors, you
Yeah.
know, because we're basically cutting our own throats when we do that. But it's going to be an interesting few years to see whether, you know, we can get a little bit of help from government.
Yeah, definitely. And just to end on a positive note, what do you think the pub trade means to you in one sentence?
Oh, it means everything. I think it's been my entire life. Oh, I'm getting upset.
Thank you so much for joining us,
Thanks.
and thank you for talking.
Oh, got me going.